Bailey Nurseries New Varieties Spring Preview, and we're getting ready to get started. If I don't answer your comments, forgive me, because our speaker will have control over you.
Thanks. I love talking.
All right, ladies, time to go.
And the place of Fragrance is doing great.
They need a new building.
Well,
Feel free to comment. I'll move this over if necessary.
It's grown down.
How was lunch? Everything okay with lunch? Yeah? Good? Okay, good. All right, so we're going to get right into the next session here with Debbie Lonnee. Debbie Lonnee is our product development manager. She is responsible for running what we call our planning and administration department. That department handles everything from working with breeders on new plants, it involves working with our production team on production schedules, and really making all those things work together. And then Debbie's also instrumental in working with our plant development team with our breeding farm down in just outside of Watkinsville, Georgia, which was newly acquired last year. So Debbie's our new plant guru, and we're excited to have you talk. So thanks, Debbie.
Everybody, can you hear me okay? I'm not known for being shy. And so yes, I am the new plant geek at Bailey Nurseries, and I am going to show you today the new varieties, the majority of the new varieties that actually went in the 2016 catalog, which you all would have got in the mail last June. Believe it or not, in my department, we're actually working on the 2017 catalog, and we'll go to press early this spring, and so to me this is kind of old news, but this is the kind of thing we work on, the new plants that we bring to market in the Bailey catalog, and they include not only plants in our own brands, but other people's brands as well. So let's get started. Just a few new trees in the schedule to show you today. A new crabapple to our program. This is called Showtime. This is a variety out of Lake County Nursery. Seems like during the economic downturn, crabapples just dumped. They just fell completely out of favor. And now we're seeing that change. They seem to be coming back. We've gotten rid of a lot of the older varieties, the disease-prone varieties off of our list, and we're trying to add newer things that have lots of seasonal interest as well as disease resistance. So this is a plant out of Ohio. Not a small plant, 25 foot tall, not quite as wide, but really beautiful flowers in the spring, that dark bud that opens up to the dark pink, and it's got some new foliage that is reddish, purplish in color, but as that foliage matures, it does deepen into a darker green, and that purple goes away. Really nice cherry red fruit, little half-inch fruit that the birds love. We've been watching the robins eat fruit over here all day long. It's been great fun. And I thought of this tree immediately when I saw them doing that. So great seasonal interest in this tree and a nice new variety. This picture doesn't do this plant justice, but I have two new trees to show you that our columnar inhabit, which is a trend that's really been developing over the last 10 years. A lot of breeding work, a lot of new varieties in skinny trees that we can fit in small urban landscapes or on small boulevards, courtyard gardens, in the townhouses. This is a Parrotia, so just think columnar, because this is the only picture I have, a close-up of the foliage. And this is a columnar Parrotia, 25 foot tall by 10 foot wide, so a nice small space tree compared to the species with really beautiful foliage. This is a picture of the emerging foliage in the spring, and it's really striking. Great retail presence in the garden center in the spring months because of that new foliage. But then it matures out to green through the summer, but then has really great fall color. So a great tree for Zone 5 and warmer gardens. And another columnar tree, the work of Dr. Earl Cully, which we really like, a columnar oak. This is a sister seedling to Regal Prince, which has been out on the market longer than this tree, which is Kindred Spirit. But this is a skinny little tree, 35 foot in height and only 6 foot in spread. Who would have ever thought we'd have oaks that we can really fit into smaller spaces? Beautiful glossy foliage, It comes out of swamp white oak and English oak, really good glossy foliage to it, good powdery mildew resistance, and already actually all the way up in the zone 4.
Feature this next week in our
All right, so we're going to get into some shrubs, and I'm going to talk at length a little bit about barberries. We've been introducing some barberries over the last couple of years. Work that was done by my original boss at Bailey's. His name is Don Sellinger. Some of you might remember him. He actually retired in 2000, but he started doing some breeding for us, and we've introduced a number of his plants. And he started breeding barberries long before we ever started talking about invasiveness on barberries. And we had selected 5 accessions, got them out to the Oregon farm, and started building numbers on them and created a plan to introduce these plants. And actually, a year ago, we got the first 2 varieties on the market. I'm going to show you those. And then these first 2 varieties that are on the list went into the 16 catalog. But introducing new plants can be challenging sometimes because once we started shipping the first varieties, we found out that our plants actually were not on the federal registry. So to ship plants interstate, ship barberries interstate, they have to be put on the federal registry at the USDA. And we had gone through all the motions to get this done. What you do is you have your plants tested at the Cereal Rust Lab, which is right in St. Paul, Minnesota, down the road from the nursery. They sent us the letter, your plants are not alternate hosts for stem rust of wheat, and the paperwork's going on to the USDA to go to the federal registry. So we thought everything was in motion. We started shipping plants, and it was actually our Minnesota State Nursery Inspector that called us up and said, "Oh, do you realize your plants aren't on the federal registry?" And so after lots and lots of phone calls, we discovered that actually 2 people had retired, and I think the paperwork must have fell behind somebody's desk. So in spring of 15, we were told they'd be on the registry by July. And they weren't. They weren't all season long. We just got notification that they're going to sign the order on March 22nd. So the plants are going on the registry. That's, if all goes well, please pray for me. Really, this has been a pain. And so we will start shipping these plants again. So these second 2 got in the 16 catalog. We have them here, we have cans. And this is Lambrusco. Lambrusco is a nice little red form. In Minnesota in Zone 4, crimson pygmy can sometimes be a little iffy from a hardiness standpoint. It can die out in years. This one's much hardier, has some similarities to crimson pygmy, has some great color to it. It's a small little plant, only 2.5 feet tall, a little bit wider, great small space hedge plant. Here's what it looks like in the field. We grow Vera plants out at the farm in Oregon on Sauvie Island, which is just west of the airport. We had some fun with these plants. We always we try to give plants little nicknames internally so they don't get mixed up in propagation with accession numbers. So we named all these after Star Trek characters. We had great, so this was Scotty, but Don the breeder didn't like Star Trek names. So we decided to name them all after wines or alcoholic beverages. So we had a lot of fun with that task as well. But great color on this plant all season long, great small space plant. Second one is Moscato, and Moscato is a green shrub essentially with some nice little reddish oranges tones when the new growth comes out. And we debated whether or not we should introduce a green barberry, but we see some uses for this, especially in Zone 4 where many of our designers try desperately to use boxwoods with way less success than Zone 5 and Zone 6. And a lot of die out and burnout. And this plant easily could be used as a substitute, a hardier substitute for boxwood. It can be sheared into a box, can be left as a round ball, but it is a neat, tidy plant, very compact, heavily branching, and just a great little variety. And then the ones that were in the 15 catalog, this is the one that's gotten the most attention. I think it's the one that people like the best. It's called Limoncello. And this is a yellow barberry. It forms a really nice round ball, 3 to 4 foot in height and spread. But what's really interesting about this plant is when the foliage emerges in the spring, you not only have that chartreuse yellow color, you have this great red mottling irregular pattern along the edge of the leaf. And it really holds that until about midsummer. It has great retail presence, beautiful in a pot. You know, the ones that we shipped, it came off the truck, and a lot of our customers said, wow, that's fabulous, and it just moved out of the store. So this one is really colorful. It really holds up well in the heat. It is a yellow barberry that doesn't burn in full sun. And case in point, this is actually my front yard in lovely South St. Paul, Minnesota. Across the river from the nursery. I carried home a rooted cutting one year from the Oregon farm, put it in the ground. It never burns. It's in the hottest west-facing part of my yard. It never burns. And that's probably a midsummer shot where a little bit of that red color is still happening on the tips. And then the last one is Toscana. Toscana has a different shape from the first three that I've shown you. It's very upright, vase-shaped, coming from one of the parents. And it has a really interesting foliar color. It emerges red in the spring, and early in the spring it has this tiny, tiny little yellow margin. It's very showy, but it's just not a wide margin. And it holds it for quite a long time. And then the color just kind of deepens and deepens, and then in the fall, it has a red fall color. It's like a burning bush red. So it goes from burgundy to red with your autumn fall color. And here, this is again another rooted cutting that I carried home and put it into my yard. You can see how it grows up and kind of vase shapes over. I actually took that picture on April 19th. So this is just emerging foliage color on Toscana. So it's a nice series of barberries. We hope you'll take a look at them and see if they work for you. Alec mentioned our new breeding farm down in Georgia. About a year ago, we bought a company called Plant Introductions, Inc. out of Athens, Georgia, that was started by Dr. Michael Durr and two partners. And we had been working with them for years and getting some of their materials into either Endless Summer or the First Editions program. And so we are now running this breeding farm, and this plant came from that farm. Although it wasn't bred, this is one of Dr. Durr's discoveries. I always feel sorry for his wife because I swear to God, they drive down the road and all of a sudden the car comes to a screeching halt and Bonnie has to wait for him to run off into a ditch and look at a plant. And that's exactly what happened with this plant. It is a plant that he found in the south. It's a Cornus.amomum. And in the south, dogwoods are not good performers. They don't hold up in the heat at all. So maybe depending on where some of you are, you've had some of those issues. This is a great heat-tolerant dogwood for warmer climates. And it has green stems throughout the summer, but then in the fall they take on great shades of red to give you that wonderful dogwood winter interest. And it also has some berries as well. And you know, the one thing that we've noticed, this is the original plant down at the farm in Georgia. We never see the Japanese beetles get onto this plant or do any damage at all, and we think that's a great big plus. So a very nice new dogwood in the First Editions program. This is a new Daphne that we are carrying, not necessarily new to the market, but we finally picked it up. After all these years of growing Carol Mackey, you know, we're always trying to find perhaps better cultivars for the landscape market. And this is a plant that was introduced by Plant Haven, which is a plant introduction company based out of Santa Barbara, California, and called Eternal Fragrance, with very nice glossy, semi-evergreen to evergreen foliage. Especially if you grow it in the Pacific Northwest, it's going to stay very evergreen. But that classic Daphne flower with that lovely, lovely fragrance to it. And this one, you know, Carol Mackey is so site-specific, hates those wet feet or poorly drained sites. This plant is not quite so fussy from a soil standpoint, so who knows, this one might take over Carol Mackey someday. Another plant from the breeding farm in Georgia. I know probably not too many of you are putting a gardenia in a garden. Anybody selling in zone 6? It's mostly everybody zone 5. Okay, well I have a number of zone 6 plants to show you today. I guess maybe the perspective might be tropical plants, a plant that you might put in a container, in a mixed container or whatever on the deck or patio. But we are doing some gardenia work in the south, trying to build in hardiness and more rebloom. And so this is one that we've introduced called Sweet Tea, that actually most gardenias in the south are zone 7 or zone 8. And this pulls the plant up into zone 6 hardiness and has a great double flower with, again, what an incredibly fragrant plant. And this one puts on that spring flush of flowers, but then gives you some rebloom throughout the season. So if you're looking for something from a tropical standpoint, that might work for you. Boy, one of the really hard parts of my job is I have to go to France every year. I really suffer, it's tough. And I work with a couple breeders in France. And so this is from a company called Bailey Nurseries. They are west of Paris. And they have a full-time breeder on staff, and one of the main product lines they work with is Hibiscus syriacus, or Rose of Sharon. And this is the first in a series of 3. They introduced them as a group. We're going to introduce them a couple of years apart. A double series called the French Cabaret series. And this is called French Cabaret Blush. The bud is pink. Can you see the bud up there? Nice pink bud. Opens up to a beautiful blush pink. Typically, double hibiscus are sterile. I always used to get a lot of grief from our farm manager down at the large farm that the singles really seeded themselves quite readily, and so the doubles are more sterile. So if that's a concern, you might want to consider looking at these sterile varieties as they come out. So a few more pictures. Really nice, very upright habit on this. Doesn't really turn into a round ball. Very upright on it. You know, of course, blooming in midsummer throughout a very long period of time, and it's really just a great color. The flower will remind you of a carnation. It's the fullest one of all the doubles in the series. To me, it's got the fullest flower head on it. In a couple years, we will have a red, and it's really good. It's not fire engine, but it's a real rich red. And a couple years after that, we will have a double purple. Takes us a little longer to get them on the market because when you bring hibiscus into the country, they actually have to go through a 2-year quarantine period. So they're in a greenhouse, you can't touch them, you can't prune them, and you have to be very careful if they watch them for disease, the USDA does. And so it takes, before we propagate, we actually have to let them sit for 2 years. So we're just bringing in the purple one right now. So very nice new hibiscus. And then another one that came from Michigan, from a grower that we work with in the nurseries. And Bernie DeWitt is the owner, and his nephew Steve discovered this plant as a branch sport and propagated it. It turned out to be stable, and it's called Summer Ruffles. And it has lovely, variegated, creamy white and green foliage with a purplish lavender flower. Here is a close-up of that foliage, a little bit irregular, but still very good looking. And then I actually took this picture in Steve's yard a couple years ago. This is the original plant, and one that he propagated, I think put it in a year or 2 later. It's not the fastest growing thing, it's not the biggest thing, it's not going to get really, really large in the garden, but it really gives you a pop of variegation throughout the season. Who cares if it blooms? It really has great variegated foliage. Some new hydrangeas. Everybody needs some new hydrangea paniculatas, right? Now, we not only grow our own brands, but we grow other people's brands, and we are a proven winner color choice grower at Bailey Nurseries. We don't grow every one of those varieties, but this is one that a lot of people have been asking for, and this is the dwarf form of Quickfire, which they've named Little Quickfire. And it brings it down in height. That's really what one of the big goals of paniculata breeding has been: size reduction and early to bloom. And this one really hits it on both marks. You know, Quickfire is one of the earliest plants to bloom in the spring, and this one blooms early as well, but it only gets about 3 to 5 foot in height. So again, smaller space gardens, foundations. It's, you know, we at the nursery have been getting rid of many of the older cultivars and going to many of the new cultivars, and of course we've introduced some, and I have one to show you in a few minutes as well. And they are all such a great improvement over some of the old varieties in the past, especially with the size and bringing the early bloom in, and color as well. This is H.quercifolia that came out of the breeding program at the U.S. National Arboretum. There are 3 or 4 varieties in their program, and we've grown a couple of the others. We finally were able to get our hands on this. This one is called Queen of Hearts. Lovely variety, nice tight habit. It's not a small plant, 6 to 7 foot tall and much wider in spread, but really full and bushy and good looking. Great, great flowers. This is a plant where the flowers have emerged, open white, have matured and taken on that pink color. We did test this for a little bit at the nursery to see how it made up in a pot, because sometimes H.quercifolias, you know, they can have that single stem shape and they can get kind of shaky in the pot. You get them off the truck and they're wobbling a little bit. This one has better branching to it and really makes up in the pot. So there is the flower as it emerges with that great white color. It really makes up beautifully in a container. It's very branchy and full, has really good retail presence on it. So that was a really great series of breeding work that came out of that program. I have a number of Crape Myrtles to show you. Again, this is breeding work out of the farm down in Georgia. We are getting requests from customers to have sizes on these where they can actually sell them as a patio plant or put them in a large mixed container. In our series of Lagerstroemias, we have both green leaf forms and dark leaf forms, which is a pretty special thing. And some of our breeding work is not as big as, you know, the 20 and 25 foot tall trees that you might see when you go down south. So they do lend themselves, they're very self-branching, and they lend themselves very nice to patio containers. So it might be something that you'd want to consider. So this is Ruffle Red Magic, an incredible flower. It's just the coolest looking flower, this double flower, where typically it's single on a Crape Myrtle. And it's a really nice, true red color. Although that picture might make you think it's one of the dark leaf forms, it is actually a green leaf form. But when the foliage emerges, there's some nice red color to it early in the season. But there's a little more close-up of the flower. It has really a ton of substance on it. But in the dark leaf series, this is the next one. So this is Twilight Magic. So initially we introduced one called Midnight Magic, Moonlight Magic, and now Twilight Magic. Dark, dark foliage, pink flowers that really look good contrasting against the foliage. All this work, we've been working on disease resistance. You know, the main disease that hits Crape Myrtles is Cercospora canker and can really devastate plants. This one has excellent resistance. But the foliage, whether the plant is blooming or not, looks fabulous in a container in the garden center. So very dark.
Even though they're listed as zone 6 to 9 months, are they worth the try in the Chicago area?
Yes, even though they're listed zone 6 to 9, would they be worth a try in Chicago? We're testing it at the large farm. We got a first planting in this year. We'll have a lot more information down the road. I think it would be a bit of a stretch in zone 5B, but perhaps in some microclimate areas. You know, if you're adventurous, hey, in Minnesota, everybody tries to push the zone limit. It's Minnesota, you know, we want cool stuff too. So you might, you know, want to try it and see what happens. And I have a couple other things to show you that we'll talk about hardiness zones. Question?
I live in one of those microclimates, and I can overwinter zone 8 bulbs in my garden, in the ground.
Really? And you are in zone 5B?
I'm downtown Chicago, almost downtown Chicago.
Downtown Chicago, and she gets zone 8 bulbs to grow. Oh, that's zone jealousy, if you ask me. Wow. Good for you. Good for you. All right. Well, you know, we are embarking with the purchase of this breeding farm and doing more plant introduction. We have test sites at the nursery at all of our sites. In Oregon, in Minnesota, of course, and a new one at the large farm here in Illinois. And we are actually embarking now on what we're calling an external trial program. And so we are working with about 8 or 9 sites across the country, from Louisiana to Texas to California, Colorado, Mid-Atlantic. And we'll be sending our plants before we introduce them, or if we're even thinking about introducing them. off to those test sites to get some feedback on all sorts of things. How hardy are they? How heat tolerant are they? How well do they grow? Do they tolerate the natural soils? So we used to do a lot of it 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And mostly they went to botanic gardens and arboretums. But what we discovered with the economy the way it was, that we couldn't get anybody to give us any feedback. So it would be great to send planes, but then we never heard anything back. So we kind of stopped doing it. So we're setting up a new program. We are compensating those places and asking for feedback in return. So I think that is going to be an exciting part of our plant introduction process at the nursery. I saw a hand over here.
With the Crape Myrtles, I've been doing it for about 10, 15 years in the western suburbs as a dieback shrub.
Okay, so in the western suburbs, he's been using Crape Myrtles as a dieback shrub. Super. All the way to the ground, do they dieback? Yeah. Okay. Helps control size, right? Yeah, I think, you know, creative experimentation, or you have customers that want to try some things, it might be great fun to try. So, all right, and you know, there are those are the newest ones. There are a number of other varieties and colors. There's 5 or 6 green leaf forms, or the 3 dark leaf forms. There's a red one coming next year. So there's more coming in this Crape Myrtle breeding. All right, we're growing Pieris. When we added it, we grew it out at the Oregon farm. We thought we'd sell all of it to our customers out there in Portland and up in Seattle and stuff, but we seem to be shipping it back here to the Midwest, and people are looking for it. This flaming silver is certainly not a new variety, but it's new to our program. So it's something that we've added. We grow it in containers, and it is a pretty little plant with that variegated foliage and that new. I bet if we went to Oregon right now, they'd be flaming red right now at the farm in Oregon. So the new growth is beautiful. All right. Oh, believe it or not, we're introducing Potentillas. Who'd have thunk it? Who needs a new Potentilla? But you know what? These are interesting little plants, and especially for our, you know, Midwest Zone 3, Zone 2 customers, they're loving this. This is work that we obtained from the Morden Research Station up in Manitoba, Canada, right out of Winnipeg. I think it's cold in Minnesota, go up there. And you may recognize that name. They're the folks that bred all the Parkland series of hardy shrub roses. They bred the series of Monardas, the Petite series, and the Grand series. And so a lot of good breeding work has come out of that program. But again, the economy sent them in a wrong direction. Not wrong. They stuck with agronomic crops. They decided to stop breeding ornamental crops. If you need some flax or wheat, go to Morden. But what they did is they distributed the ornamentals, and we actually bid on the Potentilla germplasm and obtained it. We've been admiring this series for quite a while because they had double flowers. So we have 3 to show you. 2 of them are in the 16 catalog, 1 is in the 17 catalog, and I am going to give you a little sneak peek of 17 here at the end. And these are classic Potentillas, 2 to 3 foot tall, 2 to 3 foot wide, rock solid, hardy, dummy proof. You know, homeowners that don't know how to garden, it's not that difficult to grow. There's not much to it. Take pruning well, bloom most of the summer, right? With these beautiful little double flowers that are about 1 inch across. They're like little rosebuds. First one is lemon meringue, a lighter yellow in the group. And then the next one is creme brulee. I don't think that picture quite does it justice, but it is truly a little double. And then I'll show you the last one in my sneak preview. This is a new Spirea that comes from a French breeder on the east side of France. I haven't gotten to visit him yet, but this is him right here. And this is basically a pink flowering Spirea Tour. Remember when Tour came out, nobody knew it, but oh my God, has it caught on in the last 10 years. We grow so many of them now, and they're so bulletproof. They're so easy to grow. They're self-branching. You don't have to shape them or prune them at all. And it's a great landscape plant being used by a lot of commercial landscape, but super for the home garden as well. And so this is a JLcolumnar that blooms with a pink flower. And so it is a spring blooming plant, so the flowers are formed the fall before, blooms typically in June. But one thing we've noticed on this plant in the container is that we will sometimes get a second flush of bloom later in the summer, typically late August into September. But rather than the flower being born at the terminal tip, there are all sorts of little tiny flowers that form in the leaf axils along the stem. I have never seen anything like it. It's delightful, you know, when you're a plant geek and you just see something funky like that that you've never seen before, you're really taken aback by that. I don't know if that's subtle for the home consumer or whatever, but I think it's an interesting little aspect of this plant. Very similar in size and growth needs and soil type and everything to Tor, but with the pink flower. Spring Lace Viburnum, a Zone 6 viburnum bred by Dr. Durr many, many years ago before he retired from the University of Georgia. An interspecific cross, it has some macrocephalum in it. This plant in the month of April in Georgia will just knock your socks off. It's slow growing, it's compact. That original plant there is only about 5.5 to 6 foot tall. We don't really feel like it's going to get much taller. The original plant is at least 12 or 14 years old. Beautiful lace cap flowers kind of borne horizontally along the plant. Nice glossy foliage, but it's slow. It's definitely a slow plant, but for small spaces that might be great for some of them. For us in the nursery, it takes a little bit longer to bring the plant to market, but we will have it in containers. This is Vitex. We've been joking about this Vitex. What does that foliage look like? Here in Colorado, we know. Come on. So I said that in Omaha and nobody laughed at me. So I went back and said, you guys didn't laugh at my joke. Vitex, an interesting shrub. Typically a big thing in the landscape. Shoal Creek, which I'll show you in a minute, has been used a lot. And gets 15 feet tall, easy, sometimes taller. And there's been some work done at the farm in Georgia to bring the size down on it. And a couple years ago, we introduced a variety called Delta Blues, which gets maybe about 5-6 feet tall. This one is Blue Puffball, which is a genetic dwarf, about 3 foot tall, 3 foot wide. Now, we have taken the very, very conservative route just because of lack of testing, and we've put that Zone 6 designation on this. But I think that in a year or two, once we get more experience, especially here in the Chicagoland area, we will probably move it to Zone 5 as a dieback shrub. So similar to Buddleia, but a dieback. Heck, I like dieback shrubs. They control size, right? If you have small spaces, whether they're roses or whatever, and they're certainly not difficult to prune back once you see how it's died back in the spring. So this is a nice dwarf plant, really good flower color, and I think this picture actually maybe illustrates it. So here's the classic Shoals Creek. Matt's Blue was the internal nickname for this plant before we went to Blue Puffball. You can see the difference in the depth of color on this plant. And of course, this is early on, but you can see how full it is, and this plant at the end of the summer is going to be really, really tall. So it's a nice addition to Vitex. A proven winner plant, lo and behold, is their series of Buddleia, work done by Dr. Daniel Werner at North Carolina State, really good work. And they came out with blue chip quite a few years ago, but if there was a complaint within the grower end of the industry, is the most brittle Buddleia on the market. You would put it on a rack or on a truck to ship, and half the branches would break. So actually they're phasing out of blue chip and moving everybody into blue chip junior, which doesn't have the issues with breakage on it. So I think it'll be a better plant for everybody in the long run. But similar in color, similar in size, less than 3 foot tall. These are great in mass plantings, really interesting habit to them, and nice long season of bloom. A few new clematis to show you. At the nursery, we actually grow the Raymond Evison brand of clematis. Raymond is a wonderful breeder from the island of Guernsey, the Channel Islands, which are right off of France, but they're kind of a British colony. They're kind of British and they're kind of not. It's an interesting place. I got to visit there 2 years ago. It's a subtropical island, but Raymond is an incredibly prolific breeder and has come up with some beautiful varieties. Every year at the Chelsea Garden Show, he wins medal after medal. He knows the queen and schmoozes with the queen, and he's a very kind of prim and proper British gent. But he has some great stuff. And so we grow these at the greenhouse range in our, we call it the Bud and Bloom program. So we ship it out in the spring, those first few weeks before Mother's Day, and get them onto the garden center shelf in bud and bloom, so they look really great when customers are coming in the garden center. I'm in a really cool pot. It used to be a blue pot. Now it's a slightly different pot with a really cool pot wrap on it, lots of good information for the consumer. So these are some of his newer varieties that we brought into program. And there's two different sizes we'll talk about. This is a classic variety called Chevalier, really large flowers. Almost all the varieties in Raymond's program, the flowers are about 5-6 inches across. When they open up on that trellis in the spring, they're fabulous. So this is a nice dark purple. This one, see it says Boulevard Sally, so it's Sally. The Boulevard series is a group of plants that Raymond developed that are smaller plants. So these are varieties that don't get as tall. What I recommend is that you use them as a perennial. You put them in the perennial garden and you put a beautiful obelisk around them, or if you don't want to spend the money, you put a peony cage, and they kind of grow up and over and they drape a little bit and they give you that incredible flower right in your mixed perennial bed. Again, a beautiful light pink with that dark pink stripe in the center. An Etta, again a boulevard, that purple with that almost red stripe through the middle on it. And last but not least, Crystal Fountain, which is a taller variety that we will grow up a trellis or a fence. This is very typical of the type of work. We have a number of varieties like this with these petals, the petaloids, and they're incredible. They open up in containers, they look fabulous. So it's really nice work. We really think it's a great spring plant to come out of our greenhouse range. A few new fruits. You know, we grow apples and all sorts of things at the nursery. And, you know, we're kind of very oriented to cold hardy fruits. And a couple years ago, the University of Minnesota, who has an incredible apple breeding program, you know, they're the Honeycrisp folks, they came out with a variety called Sweet Tango. And instead of allowing us as a grower to grow it and sell it to garden centers and homeowners, we licensed it to an orchard. And they actually take a royalty on every pound of apples that are sold each year. So when the 20-year patent runs out, we might be able to grow Sweet Tango. And oh boy, has that angered a lot of people. Actually, the Apple Orchard Association sued the University of Minnesota over it, but they lost. But there have been a number of other people that have decided to do some similar breeding work, using Honeycrisp as a parent. There's a whole bunch of private breeders using Honeycrisp as a parent. This comes from an orchardist in Minnesota that used the same exact parentage that's in Sweet Tango. And so this is our alternative to Sweet Tango. Sweet Tango is like Honeycrisp with really crispy flesh, and it's sweeter. It has more flavor than, I mean, Honeycrisp is a great apple. Sweet Tango, if you've never tried it, it really tastes good. And this one is very similar to it. So something that a homeowner can take home and put in the backyard. I mean, you cannot ignore this food movement in horticulture these days. And fruits, for us typically, fruits are really popular when the economy is horrible. And then when the economy turns up, they kind of go away. But as the economy has come back for us, they've been stronger and stronger than ever. We can't keep up with the demand. And to me, that's all about the food movement. I have more to show you here relates to food movement. So Kindercrisp, first year out of the gate, we took a risk and grew a huge amount of plants, and I think they're all sold out already, so I hope you got your orders in. So a new pear, a Zone 5 pear from Australia, Red Sensation, a good eating pear. We would only dream about growing this up in the Twin Cities, but it is Zone 5 hardy, but it requires a pollinator, and we grow quite a few different pears where you can use a pollinator with it. Blueberries. A couple years ago, we got into the Brazelberry program, and we have continued to add some of their new varieties to the program. You know, that program has been mostly blueberries and raspberries. I think down the road, we're going to see blackberries, we're going to see lingonberries, and a bunch of things. And for us, it's been a little bit hard of a concept to wrap our arms around because if you see the promotional work for raspberries, and I don't know if I have a picture, you know, they're selling this to consumers. Buy it, buy a beautiful glazed clay pot at the same time, put it out on your deck, and grow it as a patio plant. Run outside in the morning and pick a blueberry and put it on your cereal or put it in your yogurt. And they have bred berries that are produced for a long time, that bloom for a long time, produced. They have a raspberry that's quite compact. In Minnesota, if we let that blueberry on our deck, it'll be deader than a doornail the next spring. You know, in Minnesota, we don't want to throw our plants away. As I say, we're fiscally conservative Scandinavians. You know, that Scandinavian blood, we don't want to throw it away. So I tell them, when I talk to garden clubs, it's like, well, put it in your garden at the end of the season. Take it out of the pot, plant it in your yard. It can be grown in the ground too. So I think you guys probably deal with some of those same issues, maybe not as bad as it is in Minnesota with our weather, but it is something to think about. It's the way they're promoting it. Yeah.
What about the soil requirement for berries? Because some soils in Chicago tend to be on the alkaline side.
He asked about soil. Well, the blueberries, they love acid soils. You have to work at it. You have to work at it. If you're going to transplant it up into a pot, you'd want to use a peat-based soil mix. You might want to mix in a little bit of just elemental sulfur. So it's something to think about. But you know what? The brazelberry people are counting on the fact that a lot of customers are going to buy it. They're going to enjoy it for a season. They're going to throw it away at the end of the year, just like a geranium or a tropical hibiscus. Interesting concept with a woody plant. So a number of new ones. Blueberry glaze. Some of the blueberries are zone 5, some are zone 4. It's only because they haven't tested them in zone 4. Compact, short, small plants. Good branching habit on them. They look good in a container. So that's blueberry glaze. This one is perpetual with a little bit more that very vase-shaped habit. There it is in the ground. I don't even have a promotional picture of it in a pot. But again, vase-shaped, compact, only 2.5 foot in height. Pink icing, called that because the new growth has really pretty pink tones to it. So again, if you have this in your garden center in the month of May, you know, that new growth there, it's really attractive. That's great retail presence in the pot. And of course, Brazelberries has that branded pot. It's pretty attractive. It's a nice green color with all the logo stuff on it. And that's a requirement to be one of the brand growers. This is one that's come from the University of Minnesota. They not only breed apples, but they have bred blueberries. And we've grown a ton of them over the years. Chippewa and Polaris and all the good varieties. And I remember I used to be able to go up to the test grounds and pick blueberries. They would recruit some people that either worked at BU or in the industry, and we would pick for an hour, and they would weigh per plant. And then we would get to go out in 4 acres and pick blueberries and take them home. It was great, but they don't do it anymore. But one year I went up there, and Jim Luby, the breeder, pulled me aside. He goes, "Debbie, what do you think about these?" And I'm like tasting pink fruit off of 5 varieties. I couldn't tell the difference. I said, "Get one and get it going." And so they finally did. It's called Pink Popcorn. First plant availability from us will be July 15th. The liners came in a little bit small. They come out of tissue culture. And so we probably should have held it up till the next catalog, but we will have this plant midsummer, rock solid, hardy in zone 3. But again, there you go, prefers acid soils. So a plant that you would put in the ground, and unusual fruit that tastes just like the blueberry, but with a pink color. All right, I'm going to switch gears to some of the new perennials. They're new to our program. Maybe some of them are brand new to the marketplace. This is a new threadleaf coreopsis that come from the Saul brothers, a couple wild and crazy breeders down in Atlanta, Georgia. And they teamed up with the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And this plant is called the Mayo Clinic Flower of Hope. And I can't remember quite where, if they're collecting money and doing whatever, but the Mayo Clinic apparently is planting this at many, many of their locations this year. And it is, actually, we've tested it. It's a great plant. Moonbeam at home, again, is sometimes a little bit iffy from a hardiness standpoint. We have found this plant to be better. Great habit, really good bloom on it. So a nice improvement, I think, over Moonbeam. From Ball right here in Chicago, the Sombrero series, I have this love-hate relationship with echinaceas, all these plants that come out of tissue culture. We find in the north that anything coming out of tissue culture has to have a vernalization before it goes into a garden center or a customer's yard, or it won't survive the first winter. And of course, there can be a lot of losses, and we can sometimes battle the leafhoppers up north and aster yellows, but you can't discount the fact that there are a ton of beautiful new varieties. They're expensive, colors are great. What I like about this series is that it has really good foliage even when it's not blooming. You know, some of them are kind of scraggly in the pots. This one has really good full foliage, so it looks good in the containers if it's not blooming. Geum from Brent at Intrinsic. God, he has some great geum breeding, and named after cocktails and all sorts of things. This is a nice orange one called Sea Breeze, and with a really nice orange single flower, not real tall, about 15 to 18 inches, little 2-inch flower, hardy in zone 4. We love these home in the Twin Cities, they're really hardy. We grow a lot of the proven winter perennials. You know, that perennial program is kind of the newest part of Proven Winners. It's Walter's Gardens material, and of course they are breeding full time. They stole a Minnesota boy away, Hans Hansen, and he moved over to Michigan 5 or 6 years ago, and he is breeding there a lot of things, a lot of different genera he's working on. This is a new baby's breath called Festival Star. All these Proven Winter perennials are in that 8-inch white Proven Winter pot, a little different from the shrub pot. And I've been so impressed with this because, you know, sometimes baby's breath is such a scraggly little plant, it flops all over, and I think this picture might do it a little more justice. Really nice, kind of stiff, round, great shape, tiny little flowers, but really add a lot of substance to the garden. I've always liked the Dolce series of heucheras. Of course, there's a million of them on the market, and sometimes hard to choose which ones to grow, but this series has been very, very consistent, and it's part of the Proven Winter program called Cinnamon Curls, with really great foliage color and curly edges to the foliage. Again, Proven Winter plant, hibiscus, a lot of hibiscus, acres of hibiscus breeding at Walter's Gardens if you ever have a chance to get there. And they're getting really nice habits, really good branchy round forms with great flower size, great flower color. And they're calling all these, most of them they're putting in this Summerific series, and this one is called Cherry Cheesecake. I think that picture does the flower justice, but it's a very nice plant. I bet for you it's a little bit easier to grow in the Twin Cities. Hibiscus syriacus are a little bit fickle. And the last thing is to break bud in the garden in June. You're just standing over it going, please grow, please. It's like June 15th, and you're wondering if they made it through the winter or not. And then all of a sudden they break bud, and they go crazy. And once every 5 years, they all croak for us. I don't know how it is for you guys. But great late summer color for the garden. I have 2 pictures of this. Here, I'm going to go next one. I took this picture at Patras a couple years ago. This is Coast to Coast, part of their Shadowland series, kind of upright when it's young, very fresh, yellow. Let's go back. And then it kind of spreads out with more corrugated foliage. I thought it was real pretty. Looks good in a container. A lot of salvia breeding going on there as well, and they have a series called Color Stars. We picked this because we really like this light blue color. You know, we call things blue, and a lot of times they're more purple than blue. But I think this plant really is a nice blue color. If the end consumer just takes some time deadheading, you can have such a long season of bloom on all of these salvias. It can really extend the season. And just because of the native plant craze, we're going to grow Calameris, Blue Star, great substitute for an aster, nice and full, small, only 18 inches tall. Zone 5, although we're finding it to be a pretty good performer in Zone 4 as well. We started to grow Mukdenia. We kind of stayed away from it for a while because we didn't want to pay ridiculous tissue culture prices, and we figured out how to do it vegetatively out of the farm in Oregon. Great ground cover plant, great color on the foliage. Woodland gardens, partially shaded areas, edging a garden, mass plantings. Oh, that red on it is just, that's one in my garden. I just think it's a beautiful plant. maybe not real well known. And Nepidas, you can't have too many Nepidas, right? But Walker's Low, whoever named Walker's Low, I don't know what they were thinking, because it's not low, it's not small, right? It takes over the world. So I feel like the breeders are really working on smaller, more compact plants. And there's a lot to choose from. We've looked at this one and we decided to add it. It's called Persian Blue, only about 16 to 18 inches in height and about 2 foot in spread. Of course, prune it off and get it to rebloom all summer. This plant won a medal. When I get to go to France, I also get to go to a show in the Netherlands called the Plantarium, where new plants are introduced and then they're given awards, gold, silver, bronze medals. And so this one has won a medal. It's a really good performer in a lot of areas of the world. From Chris Hansen, the Sun Sparkler Sedums. This one is Firecracker, which is a substitute for the improvement of cherry tart. Great little small plant, loves heat, ground cover, really interesting foliage. There it is emerging in the spring. There it is in a container later in the season. I don't think there's a ton of bloom on this. This plant is being grown mostly for its foliage, but a great series of plants from Chris. Rainbows, and also from Walters. I think this plant could be a great landscape mass planting plant. It only gets about 12 inches tall and almost 2 feet wide. So if you think about maybe how we use lancifolia and a few other things in mass plantings, now we have something with great irrigation that can be used in that same way. We're going to grow Blonde Ambition. We're starting to see this granagrass being specced on jobs. And this is a really nice cultivar with those kind of blondie yellow seed heads that are up above the very fine foliage on it. Here we're seeing this being specced on landscape jobs, this longbeak sedge, and it's incredible where grasses have come in the last 10, 20 years. And then DeschampsiaGoldTau, or Gold Dew, very nice plant, hardy all the way up into zone 3. Beyond Blue Fescue, I think one of the best little Festuca glaucas that have come out with a very, very blue color to it. So think about maybe switching away from Elijah Blue to Beyond Blue. All right, I need to get into the new stuff and tease you a little bit before my time is over. So in the next catalog, you're going to see this plant. It's a little succulent or button bush. And we've actually had this plant for years. It was discovered in one of our fields, in a field of just straight occidentalis, and it was much shorter, much more compact. And we were going to introduce it, and then when the economy went down and the landscape business seemed to drop, we kind of held back on it. But we do see this as a great landscape plant. It's a mass planting plant. It tolerates low wet areas, but it also tolerates dry areas as well. It can be used in mass plantings. It is a native plant. Has that incredible flower on it, done with a really interesting seed head that's eaten by all sorts of animals. So if you're looking, to bring the wildlife in, I think this is something that you would want to look at. We really like the habit. It's just, even though it's 5 foot tall compared to species, there's shorter inner nodes, and it's nice and full and branchy. So green shrubs are coming back. And of course, I made a comment earlier, weeds another Hydrangea paniculata, but we all do. And of course, this is the other breeder that I work with in France. Mr. Jean Renaud is a wonderful little 85-year-old man and his son that I work with. This one will be out. We should have some containers available on this next summer. It's called Diamond Rouge. This, we believe, is the one with the most red color, or will be the one with the most red color on the marketplace. So let me just run you through. There we are with Mr. Renaud. That's Mark. And in one of the big fields that we look at in late August, early September, there's thousands of plants there to look at. And here's a close-up of Diamond Rouge. Of course, it starts at classic white. The color starts to come at the bottom of the cone and works its way up. And then it just turns redder and redder. And of course, if we have those great August conditions where we have warm sunny days and cool nights, that's really when the color is expressed. And so last year, I know for us in the Twin Cities, it was great. I think you guys had those conditions here as well. But this is the picture I think that always kind of does it for people, maybe illustrates the color best. So I took this picture 2 years ago, and they had actually shipped 99%. They introduced this plant in Europe a couple years ago. We also have to go through quarantine on this. And they had shipped 99% of their crop, and all they had left was this. They staged their paniculata crops. That's probably vanilla strawberry, maybe that is. And they stage them and prune them so they have bloom at different times so they can continue to send out flowering plants throughout the summer. But this row of Diamond Rouge just knocked your socks off. You could see it from a mile away, and you can just really see how red the color is. And to me, it's kind of a tweener plant. So the first two plants that came from Mr. Renault were vanilla strawberry, 7-8 foot, strawberry Sunday, last year or the year before, only about 4 foot. This one gets about 5 foot tall and 5 foot wide. So really nice size for foundation plantings. There he is, really big sneak peek. This is the next one coming in a couple years. We don't even quite know what year we're going to have. It's going to be called Strawberry Cream. And it's like vanilla strawberry on steroids. He's very proud of it, as you can see, and he's great fun to go visit. So that's a really big sneak peek. Don't tell anybody about that one yet. It's between you and me and the fence post, okay? All right, a privet, another green plant. Oh my gosh, we're introducing green plants. But this plant came to us from a Colorado nurseryman. You know, home in Minnesota, we have been really struggling since we lost Columnar buckthorn. You know, for that hedgy, upright, Columnar plant for small spaces. We can't do it anymore. It's banned in Minnesota. And this plant came to us and we said, oh my God, here is the replacement for it. And we've had a lot of interest in this plant. This plant actually is not, we decided to pull it from the 17 catalog and wait for 18. In test, it grew like a weed, it propagated at 100%, and we started building numbers for an introduction in late summer of 16. And then all of a sudden, we got a call in the fall from a production guy. Said, boy, we're really having some problems with this. It's not growing. And we like scratched our heads. We said, what the heck? Well, 2 months later, we finally got a confession that they had been sprayed with herbicide accidentally. Yes, the trials and tribulations of bringing new plants to market. But they seem to be growing out of it really well. So here's our plan. If they are really in great shape this summer, and we're ready to turn the switch, we're going to turn the switch and we're going to sell. We're going to let all of our salespeople know, we're going to let our customers know, maybe build a nice little color picture page for it and start selling it. And if we feel the need to hold back a little bit, then it'll come the following year. It's very upright, it's green. We've seen one berry in our test block. That's all we've seen. We've been asked a lot about invasiveness. And we haven't seen it berry. Good glossy foliage, good growth rate, 12 foot tall, a couple feet wide. What a great full hedge plant, full sun. So we're pretty excited about that. Here's the third one of the Potentilla series. This one's called Citrus Tart. We had fun eating all these after food. And we were hungry and we had to go to lunch. And this is the darker, that classic golden yellow color in Potentillas is what Citrus Tart is. Again, that 1 inch wide flower with the double petals. Rock solid, hardy, easy to grow. So that one, we'll probably have some containers ready August 15th, 16. So look for that. We're going to introduce a couple of azaleas from the U of M program. I bet many of you know the lights azaleas that were developed there. And the person that's taken on that program brought these to us and said, we want these in first edition. So we have 2 varieties that we're bringing to market. We'll have nice numbers in spring of 17. If you want to buy a plant in summer of 16, you can. But these are spring blooming, rock solid, hardy azaleas. This one is, and we named the series Electric Lights. This one is the red. And my new variety coordinator, Lauren, and myself actually got to pick out of 3 red ones, we picked the color. Because I'm sorry, all you men are colorblind. The colorblind men wanted the orange red. We wanted the fire engine red. And so we had fun choosing it. And I love to rub it into the breeder. But we're very excited about it, only 4 to 5 foot tall, that great spring flower. The flower buds are hardy to -30. So we're really excited. And then a true double, Electric Lights double pink. A really substantive, very, very large flower on this one. And last but not least, a new viburnum, a Viburnum plicatum, that came from the breeding farm in Georgia. It's really a lovely plant, a little baseball-sized flower in early April. So we named it Opening Day after the baseball season. Really nice upright habit, good foliage, clean foliage. Flower is fabulous on it. 5 foot tall, 5 foot wide at the most. A really nice, and it's much faster growing than that spring lace that I showed you. Will make up in a container much faster. So lots of interesting stuff coming down the road. And with that, I hope you enjoyed some of it. Maybe one plant inspired you to go order up something new, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll have this posted in the next couple days.